I present to you the truth behind GunZ the Second Duel. An insider perspective, of course. This is the beginning of GunZ 2. I'll be breaking down reasons why GunZ 2 is a phenomenal game. In this video, we will be exploring and explaining the mechanics, how the patch notes have changed the game forever, and discuss the supposed issues with the game. And despite GunZ 1 and GunZ 2 being very similar games, explain why it's so heavily disliked among the GunZ community. I'm Moa. Let's rock. GunZ 2 wasn't perceived well by the GunZ Duel community as it was seen as too slow, jank dependent, spraying was relevant, the damage was inconsistent, no mechanics or techniques to be seen, etc. While some of these are true, but only in early access though, GunZ 2 had its issues with class balance. It's later addressed with future patch notes very soon after launch of the early access in April. The game eventually gets patched and transforms into this very smooth, fast-paced movement game that you're familiar with today in GunZ the Second Duel. Not a direct comparison to K-Style from GunZ the 1 the Duel, it resembles a little bit of K-Style, being half-step and reload canceling. If you're unfamiliar with half-step in GunZ 2, or half-step in general, this is a great example of what it would be like when mixing different half-step strings together. GunZ the Second Duel was supposed to be an easier to pick up, more difficult to master game. 2 was trying to appeal to the casual and competitive audience, while all the GunZ Duel elitists and players saw this as a game not taken too seriously, and nowhere near the same skill cap and skill expression as the first one had. GunZ Duel being the first installment, it also allowed a lot of time to develop and establish a meta format that everyone is familiar with and enjoys. GunZ 2, there was no chance, given though the mechanics and skill cap is there. From February 2014 and March 2014, the game was still in early access and not even 1.0 form. The game was still in development and balance changes needed to be made. The current issues were later addressed in future patch notes. People should give it a shot, really. Peak players reaching around 10,000 players in the release of the game, and nowhere near that today. This is going to be the next chapter of GunZ 2, an insider perspective. GunZ 2 was designed to be the sequel to the original GunZ, and quite honestly, they did a pretty amazing job. GunZ 2 is a surprisingly similar game to GunZ, other than the mechanical functionalities, which with that alone is pretty similar, being the input look at things. GunZ 2 half-step has just an extra few steps to properly perform a half-step compared to GunZ 1. But with that in mind, GunZ 2's is faster for sure, and dashes way more quickly. With that in mind, do you remember that super popular GunZ video that came out last year? Yeah, that one. This video in particular stood out to me because it talked about GunZ 2. It says absolutely nothing about the actual game other than lacking mechanics and techniques.
Percent of the time, I have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about.
As you may know, GunZ 2 had no intention of becoming a replica of GunZ 1, as many people would have wanted. Though it has its own distinctive playstyle, and you could definitely make your own as well. But it's still very similar to GunZ 1, even so. It uses a similar input system, being half-step, but in a faster manner. Being that half-step chaining, also known as legacy half-step dash cancel in this game, or DHS chaining, which is double half-step, and quick lunge, of course, which is a GunZ 2 exclusive mechanic and technique. They do exist. The mechanics and techniques do exist in this game. They're used for positioning, for air and ground movement, looking for a shot angle, and making jagged movements to trick the opponent. It can also be used along the walls, so you can double half-step on the ground and or on the walls. Multi-variations of half-step, it's the same inputs, though it uses the same to get around the map quickly and tracking down your opponents. Now, I'm going to give an extra inside perspective. In this case, I'll be talking about Maya and their response to the development of GunZ 2. Having 25 staff members working day and night, that being their primary excuse for not making much improvements with the game, that in mind, they haven't updated the game since 2015, the 1.1.1 form, Rose's original launch. This is a response that Venister made, one of the developers of Guns 1 and Guns 2, that they had no intention of bringing K-Style into Guns 1, even Guns 2. They had no intention of bringing back K-Style into Guns 2, and instead they added other animation cancels. And they say that quick swap cancel is a animation cancel? I don't think that's a very good example. It's making it sound like half step doesn't exist. Every single mechanic and technique in the game requires some sort of cancel one way or the other. What I'm trying to say is that the Guns 1 community and the Guns 2's development team even just don't seem to know anything about Guns 2. As players, as a community, we're the people who find the meta, and myself included. This game may even be the most technical third-person shooter. One of the biggest issues, if not the only issue with Guns 2 Second Duel, has to be its peer-to-peer host connection system. The lack of dedicated servers is ultimately what ruined the game. In response to this, we hope we can create the exact same experience, but in the private server. Even so, the peer-to-peer system isn't that bad actually. The higher ping you go, there is a clear hitbox delay with every weapon you use. Though anything below 180 ping is absolutely playable, even in competitive play. Classes, or you can call them characters in Guns 2, were a huge change compared to the customization that Guns 1 once had. While the cosmetic customization is still there, instead you get to pick a particular character. Of these characters, Ivan is definitely considered to be the main character of the game, and the game was built around him. Not that it was a bad thing though. Elena, one of the most problematic characters in the game. Mechanics are not needed for her. Her spraying and damage is insane. Her mobility is just as good as everyone else's. In Guns 1, there's K-Style, which not only refers to half step, but refers to double shotgun and sword. Our equivalent to that is Ivan or Wayne. Maybe Rose to some degree, but the rest of the characters are fun filler attributes to the game for the campaign, opposed to the competitive nature for the game. One of the biggest problems when talking about Guns 2 has to be talking about the review page and the store page, as well as the Steam community's responses about the game. A lot of these responses and reviews have come from 2014 mostly. Most of these are 2014, which means that none of them are really that relevant anymore, or the game is no longer in a good state because the game's dead. It has nothing to do with the actual game, especially when all of the patch notes are back. Most of these reviews have to do with Guns 1. It has no actual criticism of what makes the game bad. And you look at the reviews as well, it's nothing compared to like any other game I've seen. There's so much positivity about the game itself. Nothing bad about the game. When it talks about like stuff like this, the Steam community, Guns 1, they talk nothing about Guns 1 and they do nothing but compare the game. When in reality, the games are very similar. Guns is known for its overarching difficulty and seemingly endless plateaus you encounter when trying to improve your gameplay. However, Guns 2 does have the same treatment. It is very difficult. A lot of questions are asked whether or not all these mechanics are even used in competitive play, and they very much are. Some not used, being insanely frame perfect or impractical, but most of them are relevant. Some of the hardest ones being grounded quarter slash, for instance, or DHS, or legacy half step dash cancel. My favorite thing about Guns 2 the Second Duel has to be the movement and the skill expression. But not only that, the gameplay itself is just really fun. The community exists, but not the active player base. Quite honestly, any amount of people would help. With the private server in mind, it's ready to download right now. Anybody is able to get it. At the time editing the video, it's unfortunately down, but you can still check it out anyways. You can also download it still. Playing on the Steam version is great as well, and especially if you prefer that. Every item in the game is accessible in both versions. Check out the Discord for more information, and if you want to get all the items. Ultimately, this game is great and deserves much more attention than what it has right now. My channel will be receiving more GunZ 2 updates and content updates, tutorials coming up soon, and more tutorials on the private server as well as how to use the mods to get all of the items in the game and the installations for it.
I was checking.
Thank you
That's
all
an easy
so much
mistake
for
a lot of
watching.
people make.
I really appreciate it and I put a lot of hard work into this one. You guys have a wonderful
This
day.
is the most GunZ stream setup I've ever seen.
Dude, shut your bitch ass up. I'm trying to test some shit real quick. I'm trying to test some shit right now. It's
I'm
actually
taking
so slow.
I'm taking a clip.
Hey, take a clip of this. Anyways. Is this doable? Hold on, I need to look at max frames.